On August 21, 1999, a tiny giant panda was born at the San Diego Zoo.
She was incredibly small, fragile, and completely dependent on her mother. For the first few days, her mother was her entire world. For a newborn this fragile, every breath mattered. The keepers could only watch carefully and hope the tiny cub would survive. Every movement was being watched by the people responsible for keeping her safe. Her mother's warmth and care were the only protection this fragile life had. For now, Hua Mei slept, while her mother guarded every quiet moment. Even the smallest movement reminded the keepers how vulnerable she still was. But little by little, the tiny cub was beginning to show that she was strong enough to fight for her life. For the keepers, every day brought another moment to record, another reason to hope. Whenever Hua Mei moved, her mother instinctively pulled her closer. Her mother cared for her with the patience nature had taught her. Outside the den, the keepers could do little except watch and wait. Sometimes, the most important moments were the quietest ones. Then came another tiny sign that Hua Mei was growing stronger. The bond between mother and daughter was becoming impossible to miss. For the first time, Hua Mei was beginning to notice the world around her. The most dangerous beginning was slowly turning into a story of hope. But Hua Mei's extraordinary journey was only beginning. As the weeks passed, the tiny cub began to look less fragile and more like a young panda. Her mother continued to care for her, but Hua Mei was beginning to discover the world around her. For the keepers, every new movement was another sign that Hua Mei was developing normally. Soon, Hua Mei was no longer content to simply lie still. Her mother still knew when to step in, protecting her without stopping her from exploring. Every small milestone was carefully documented by the people watching over her. After every little adventure came a quiet moment beside her mother. Their bond was changing too, becoming a quiet conversation between mother and daughter. Everyone could see it now. Hua Mei was becoming more curious, more active, and more confident. Hua Mei had survived her most fragile days, and now she was ready to discover what came next. With every attempt, Hua Mei was learning how to move through the world on her own. The world outside the den was becoming more interesting, but her mother still kept a careful watch. Inside the enclosure, Hua Mei was slowly becoming exactly what the keepers had hoped to see, a healthy, curious young panda. Her mother was teaching her something important without words, when to stay close and when to explore. Behind the glass, the keepers were watching a personality emerge. Curiosity was pushing her to try things she had never done before. For the people caring for her, every new attempt was another sign of progress. After every adventure, Hua Mei still returned to the place where she felt safest. Another morning arrived, and Hua Mei was stronger than she had been the day before. The tiny cub who once depended on her mother for everything was now beginning to walk toward her own world. Hua Mei was changing quickly, and her curiosity was becoming impossible to ignore. Her mother was still teaching her the quiet lessons that only a mother could give.
The keepers were beginning to see something different, a young panda that wanted to explore everything.
Every smell, every leaf, and every corner of the habitat was something new to discover. And whenever the world became too unfamiliar, she knew exactly where to look. Every day, another small milestone appeared before their eyes. Then, Hua Mei discovered that climbing was much harder than it looked. After every failed attempt, her mother was still there. Failure did not discourage her. It simply meant she would try again tomorrow. The more Hua Mei explored, the more the world seemed to become a playground. Curiosity was slowly replacing the fear of everything unfamiliar. For the first time, Hua Mei was beginning to understand that she could move away and still find her way back. Every corner offered something new for the young explorer to investigate. For Hua Mei, even a fallen branch could become a new toy. The keepers were seeing more than growth now. They were seeing confidence. After exploring the unknown, Hua Mei still knew exactly where home was. Some of the most important lessons were learned without a single word. The helpless newborn from weeks earlier was slowly becoming a panda capable of exploring on her own. And with every step forward, Hua Mei was getting closer to the independent life waiting for her. Now Hua Mei was beginning to discover one of the most important parts of a panda's life: food. At first, every bite was an experiment. The bamboo around her was no longer just part of the scenery. It was becoming part of her daily life. Her mother was never far away, even as Hua Mei learned to make her own choices. Then one day, Hua Mei managed to climb a little higher than before. From higher ground, even the familiar habitat looked different. For the keepers, moments like this were proof that the fragile cub they had once worried over was growing stronger. But learning to climb also meant learning how to come back down. And once again, the safest place in the world was beside her mother.
Another day ended quietly, but Hua Mei's journey toward independence was only getting started.
Each morning brought a little more independence. She was learning not only where to explore, but where to find what she needed. The distance between mother and daughter was slowly becoming larger. Her mother was still watching, but she no longer needed to follow every step. The keepers could see the change too. Every new behavior was carefully recorded, because the day would eventually come when she would have to stand on her own. For the first time, Hua Mei could walk past her mother without needing her to follow. The little cub, who once needed constant protection, was slowly learning to leave the nest behind.
And slowly, the distance between them became a glimpse of the life Hua Mei would one day have to live alone.
Hua Mei was no longer simply exploring her enclosure. She was learning how to navigate the world. Even food was becoming something she could find for herself. The keepers knew these moments mattered. Independence had to be learned gradually. For the first time, her mother could stay behind while Hua Mei continued forward. She was becoming more confident with every new challenge. She was beginning to spend more time simply observing the world around her. Her mother still called her back, not with words, but simply by being there. Their bond remained strong, even as Hua Mei slowly began walking her own path. For now, she still had her mother beside her. But change was coming. And then came another morning when Hua Mei walked away, and her mother simply watched. For the first time, the camera followed Hua Mei without her mother beside her. She found food, found shelter, and found her own rhythm. The keepers had watched her grow from a fragile newborn into a young panda capable of caring for herself. There were still challenges ahead, but Hua Mei no longer seemed afraid of them. The little cub, who once needed constant protection, had become remarkably self-reliant. But independence was only one part of the journey. The more she explored, the more she looked like a panda preparing for a life beyond the nursery. Life had become simpler now. Find food, explore, rest, and keep moving. But soon, Hua Mei's story would take her far beyond this familiar place. Hua Mei had survived the beginning of her life. Now, another chapter was waiting. By now, Hua Mei had become comfortable moving through the world on her own. She had learned where to find food, where to rest, and where to feel safe. The keepers knew that the next stage of her life would require something very different. The time was coming to prepare her for a future beyond the place where she had grown up.
The goal was not to control her instincts, but to help her become ready for what came next.
Every lesson was designed to let Hua Mei make the decision herself.
And Hua Mei was learning quickly.
The more freedom she was given to explore, the more naturally she responded. She was no longer the fragile cub everyone had once worried about. The lessons of her childhood were becoming instincts she could carry with her. Hua Mei was being given more freedom, and every day she seemed more prepared for it. The keepers were no longer teaching her every move. They were learning when to step back. She had learned one of the simplest rules of survival: find what you need and keep moving. Even the smallest climb was another step toward confidence. From above, the familiar world looked a little larger. Every observation gave the keepers another reason to believe she was ready for the next stage. She had learned how to climb, how to explore, and how to find her way back down. Now the most important lesson was simple. She had to be comfortable on her own. And Hua Mei seemed ready to face the quiet moments without anyone beside her. The little panda who had once depended on others was now walking toward a future of her own.
Another morning arrived, and Hua Mei was still moving forward.
She no longer spranenetin en farni klein. She no longer needed to be shown where to look. The open spaces no longer seemed frightening. They seemed full of possibilities.
For the keepers, watching her walk away was becoming a sign of success.
The same little cub who once struggled with every climb was now doing it almost effortlessly. From that small wooden platform, she looked less like a cub and more like a young panda preparing for independence. She could climb, she could explore, and she could always find her way back to what she needed. Nature was becoming something she could read without being taught. Soon, even the keepers could only watch as Hua Mei chose where to go. She could disappear into the bamboo and return whenever she was ready. The more independent she became, the more important the next decision would be. Behind the glass, the people who had watched her grow were beginning to think about what came next. Hua Mei did not know it yet, but her childhood was approaching its final chapter. Everything she had learned had prepared her for one final step. The decision ahead would not be easy for anyone who had grown attached to her. The place that had once been her entire world was slowly becoming only one chapter of her story.
For Hua Mei, it was simply another peaceful evening. For the people watching her, it meant something more.
Soon, watching her would no longer be enough. They would have to let her go. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning and a goodbye to the life she had always known. She had survived her first days. She had learned to explore, and now she was ready for whatever came next. She walked through the place that had raised her, unaware that her life was about to change forever. For the keepers, this was no longer just another morning. Years of care had led to this moment, and every detail mattered. Hua Mei was simply doing what she had learned to do best, living naturally. She had no idea that the familiar ground beneath her paws would soon become a memory. Behind the glass, the people who had protected her were preparing themselves for goodbye. Even on the day everything was changing, Hua Mei remained completely unaware.
After all those years, there was nothing left to teach her.
She simply kept walking, just as she had learned to do. She was still just Hua Mei, quiet, curious, and completely unaware of what waited beyond the enclosure. For the people who had raised her, this was the hardest part. Not knowing what she felt, but knowing what had to happen. The final evening of her old life was passing quietly. Tomorrow would be different, even if Hua Mei did not know it yet. While Hua Mei slept, the people around her prepared for the next chapter. The morning began quietly, but this time, everyone knew it was different.
She's over there.
I see her.
Hua Mei woke up to the same world she had always known.
But for the people watching her, this morning was the beginning of goodbye. She had spent her childhood here. Soon, she would have to leave it. They had cared for her when she was too small to survive alone. Now they had to trust everything they had taught her. She entered this world as a fragile little cub. Now, she was ready to leave it and begin the journey she was born for.